2023, Las Anod stopped being a town on a map. And became a place where families learned the weight of a single night. Not in headlines, in bedrooms that turned into rubble, in kitchens where smoke came from more than cooking, in mothers counting children by touch, not by sight, because the dark was safer than the street. Some fled with nothing but a scarf and a birth certificate. Others fled without even that. The United Nations later estimated between 154,000 and 203,000 people displaced as the fighting escalated. A population pushed outward into villages, schoolyards, and open land, where shade became shelter and water became a daily negotiation. This is what conflict does. It makes survival feel private and politics feel like something happening far away to someone else. But now, something rare is about to happen here. Because today, the president of Somalia is coming to Las Anod, not as a symbol, not as a rumor, not as a promise delivered by delegation, as a body, as a motorcade, as the state arriving in person. For decades, Somalia's federal center was distant language here, a word spoken in Mogadishu, but not felt on this plateau. Las Anod lived in the space where borders are argued, where administrations make claims, and where civilians pay the price of disputed ideas. Then 2023 happened, and the dispute stopped being theoretical.
ciidanka dabdamiska ee magaalada Las Anod ayaa ka howlgalay meherada ku yaala bariga magaalada Las Anod kuwaas oo ku gubtay madaafiicda ciidamada Somaliland ay ku garaacayaan xaafadaha kala duwan ee magaalada Las Anod. duqa degmada Las Anod waxa uu hore u sheegay in ciidamada dabdamiska heegan buuxa la geliyay isla markaasna bulshadu ay u adeegi doonaan. haddaba muwaadin soo garaac 990 si dabdamisku ku caawiyo.
A city was shelled. Hospitals reported surges of wounded. Civilians fled in waves. And after months of fighting, the humanitarian math became the clearest truth. Families who once argued politics at tea stalls were now arguing over a blanket, a tent, a cup of clean water.
qaar baa aniga ii arkaya inaan gardarahay qaar baa idiin arkaya haddaad tiraahdaan Somaliland ma nihin inaad gardaran tihiin waa bani aadam iyo garashayaridii reer Las Anod hubka ha dhigeen oo ha la hadleen Somaliland ha la hadleen waxa ay doonayaan nabad bay ku helayaan ha la hadleen xaguu jiray 15 sanadood ay u dambeysay xaguu jiray ninka geela dhacay oo xeerada gashaday iyo lagu ababiyay lagu barbaariyay geela adiga leh si ugu wada dagaalamaan jiilin ilaa koob iyo 90kii 32 sanadood baa ka soo wareegay 32 sanadood ba halgan weyn ayaa loogu jiray dad u dhashay Sanaag Sool Ayn Awdal dagaal aad u weyn bay ku jireen oo afiyo adina inaan la ixtiraafin Somaliland xaasidnimo kama ahayn nacayb kama ahayn waxay ahayd mar rabno inaanu Soomaaliya inaanu ka goono oo nala ku muquuniyo inaanu ka goono mar rabno ayay ahayd marnaba garab lagama helin dawladda Soomaaliyeed waxa la yaab leh dawladdii Soomaaliyeed oo laga go'ayay marnaba ma ay xurmayn dadkii u halgamayay inay Soomaaliya ka sii mid ahaadaan waxa wax kastaba kaga weyn Somaliland xurmaynteeda ayaa wax kasta kaga weynay hase yeeshee waxay garan waayeen adigoo nin xurmaynaya inaadan nin dhabarka kaga tuman karin
A child was indoors, not running, not on Frontline, inside a relative's home, where adults send children when they think the street is worse. Then the munition hit the neighborhood. The next part is always described the same way. Smoke, shouting, and the sudden certainty that something cannot be undone.
The bombardment lasted for 8 hours, with almost every corner of the city being hit.
Relatives did what families do when they refuse reality. They carried her to General Hospital, still bargaining with God, with time, with anything that might reverse it. But she was already dead. That night, her mother said she was buried in a mass grave because war doesn't only kill people, it steals the dignity of how they're mourned. Later, the world learned the child's name, Rayyan Abdullahi Ahmed, 7 years old.
Rayyan qolkan ayay hadba dhinac u cararaysay iyadoo naftu laalinayso. Halkan waxa taala bombaladii Rayyan. Rayyan waxa nasiib u yeelanay. Halka qolkan waxa ku jira waa qolkoodii hurdada. Rayyan way dhimatay. Gurigoodii wuu.
And once you know that, clashes becomes a dishonest word, because the city didn't just lose peace, it lost homes. It lost mothers who tried to flee and never reached the road. It lost the people who ran toward danger in ambulances. It lost nurses inside hospitals, places that should mean protection. So when people gather here, it's not just entertainment or theater, it's reckoning. Because this crowd is not only celebrating a visit, it's measuring the distance between sacrifice and recognition. For 3 decades, the most stubborn unionist resistance came from the Northeast, from Khaatumo and Makhir, communities who refused to accept secession as destiny, even as the federal center moved cautiously, calculatedly, sometimes silently. In Las Anod, in Buhog, in the long arc from Kalshale to today, unionist communities paid in displacement, graves, and siege conditions, while Mogadishu often acted as if the argument could be postponed. Critics inside the unionist base say caution wasn't just strategic. They say it was political fear, that openly backing these territories would be branded inside Somali power arithmetic as a third Darod state, a move that could rupture alliances in the brutal, corrupt 4.5 system. They point to moments that still sting. In the north, some remember federal message during the Galmudug inauguration from President Hassan Sheikh, a tone that suggested state building was already complete, as if unresolved Northern Unionist claims no longer mattered.
mid baa wuxuu yidhi warnimayo maannaka waalan mise cadan baa laga heesayaa midda aan arrintaa u leeyahay waa mid aad iyo aad noo taabanaysa haddaannu nahay reer Khaatumo haddaannu nahay inta reer waqooyiga ah ee midnimada Soomaalida rabta waxaan maqlaynaa waa la nakhtiimayaa gobollada la dhisayo oo Hiiraan iyo Shabeellada Dhexe haddii la boko gudoomiyaha saaxiibkay Muungabna xoogaa laga soo jafjafay banaadir buu sheegayaa laakiin warkaas wuu soo noqnoqday oo waxaad ba moodaa reer koonfur inay midda heshiis ku yihiin su'aasha meesha taala waxa weeye maxaa loogu talagalay ummadda Soomaalida ah ee waqooyi ku nool ee midnimada Soomaaliyeed rabta waxa loogu talagalay muxuu yahay waxa muuqata kala go'a Soomaaliya inuu koonfur ka socdo, kala go'a Soomaaliya meesha lagu eedaynayo Somaliland waxaaba kula shaqaynaya koonfur Soomaaliyeed. koonfur baan qiraynin inay dadka midnimada Soomaalida raba ee u dhimanaya hadda ma aha Khaatumo, ma aha. waxaan qabaa dadka majority-ga ku nool waqooyi ama Somaliland inay rabaan midnimada Soomaaliyeed. haddii sida muuqata ooda laga soo rogto ee dayaa leh taariikhdaa sheegi doonta. aad iyo aad baad u mahadsanta.
dagaalka laascaanood ninkii bilaabay furihii albaabka lagu furay dagaalka ayuu hayay, laakiin ma hayo furihii dagaalka lagu xuri lahaa. kaas gacanta Soomaaliland ku jira.
hore markaad tirahdeen cusadu waa ka dhadhawacan tahay, markaad tirahdeen shimbiraha codkoodu waa ka macaan yihiin sidii hore yaan idiin imid.
Garad Jama Garad Ali accused the Somali government this week of secretly supporting Somaliland in its military campaign against his clan militia in the city of Lasanod. Traditional council spoke in Nairobi. He publicly called out the federal administration led by President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud and Prime Minister Hamza Abdi Barre, and stopping efforts to impose sanctions on Somaliland. Garad Jama has met with the Somali president in the capital to discuss the crisis. Additionally, Garad Jama accused the president of trying to cover up Somaliland's war crimes in the Sool region. The traditional elders' accusation comes just days after Somaliland's interior minister, Mohammed Kahin Ahmed, blamed the Puntland administration for the conflict in Lasanod. According to Ahmed, neither Somaliland, the people of Lasanod, or the Somali government bear responsibility for the conflict.
Not on paper, not in press statements, in the way mothers carried children through dust, in the way families slept under plastic sheets, in the way city learned to measure time by shelling and by the silence that came after. Now the road to Las Anod is crowded, not with convoys of war, but with expectation. For people who have lived through abandonment, this is not a ceremony, it's a test of whether Somalia is a flag or a functioning promise. But Las Anod is not the whole story, because while the crowds wait on plateau, another map is being argued far beyond Sool, a map pulled by recognition politics, by port power, by Red Sea strategy, by old rivalries inside Somalia's federal project, and by Western fault line, Awdal, where protests and clan tension exposed how fast unity can fracture. This hour is about what happens when a state finally shows up and discovers the border was never just geographic. Mid-January 2026, President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud arrived in Las Anod, a visit described in multiple reports as the first by a sitting Somali president in decades. And he used that visit to formalize a political shift. He declared the Northeastern Administration, covering Sool, Senag, and parts of Togdel, a recognized federal member state within Somalia's constitutional order. This is not a minor announcement, because those same territories are also claimed by secessionist administration in Hargeisa, and the argument over them has already produced a war, displacement, and graves. And inside Las Anod, the war did not end neatly. It hardened into files: the displaced file, the dead file, the reconstruction file, and the prisoner file. Local leaders say the city still holds captured fighters from the conflict, a reality that turns reconciliation into something colder than poetry. Prisoners are not only prisoners, they're leverage, their trauma, their unfinished negotiations kept behind gates. supporters called it overdue integration, a state returning to citizens who paid the price of distance. Critics call it escalation, a constitutional move inside a territorial dispute. But even that disagreement reveals the deeper truth. Somalia's borders are not only contested externally, they're negotiated internally through security, clan arithmetic, and foreign leverage. Just weeks before the presidential trip, a different shock hit Somalia's map, not from a battlefield, but from a diplomatic announcement. On December 26, Israel formally recognized Somaliland as an independent state. Somalia condemned the move as an attack on sovereignty. And when the Continental Line appeared fast, the African Union Peace and Security Council condemned Israel's recognition and called for immediate revocation, reaffirming Somalia's territorial integrity. The United Nations, the question became sharper, with member states raising questions about motives and regional consequences. Israel defended the decision, and days later, its foreign minister visited Hargeisa, a move Somalia denounced as a violation of its sovereignty. This is the part many outside the Horn misunderstand. Recognition is not only symbolic. In fragile regions, it behaves like a lever. It turns local disputes into international bargaining chips and makes domestic cohesion a security requirement, not a slogan. The President's arrival in Las Anod is not isolated. It is timed inside a pressure storm. External recognition politics, federal consolidation, and regional actors recalculating along the Red Sea. If you want to see how quickly recognition spills across borders, look at Djibouti. After Israel's recognition, Djibouti moved to close Somaliland's liaison office, signaling alignment with Somalia's territorial integrity and regional opposition to unilateral recognition. Then the quarrel turned practical. Reports described Hargeisa suspending Air Djibouti flights amid diplomatic tensions, a small aviation decision that reveals a larger truth. In the Horn, sovereignty is often enforced through access, offices, corridors, ports, air routes. And the message was unmistakable. Recognition didn't create a new state on the ground, but it did reorder relationships around it, and it forced neighbors to choose where they stand. Then came another rupture, this one aimed directly at influence networks. On January 12, 2026, Somalia's government announced it was annulling all agreements with UAE, including port deals and defense security cooperation. But Somalia is not a single administrative machine. The next day, regions rejected Mogadishu's move, including Somaliland, Puntland, and Jubaland, areas where UAE has long penetrated, saying they would continue their UAE partnerships. This is the structural problem, stated plainly. When a federal center says sovereignty, and regions say our contracts stand, foreign influence doesn't need to invade, it just needs to sign. And this is where the Red Sea enters the story. As more than geography, because in this corridor, Bab el-Mandab and the Gulf of Aden, ports are not only commercial, they're leverage. They shape security partnerships, surveillance capacity, military logistics, and the political survival of local elites. The new northeastern state is not only a win for unity, it is also a challenge to existing federal balance. Its geography sits between Somaliland and Puntland, and that alone makes it a test case for Somalia's federal design. And then there's the detainee question. The prisoner's file, which hangs over the region like a loaded instrument. The Red Cross has documented access to hundreds of detainees in Las Anod. Locally, the political argument often sounds like this. Release without guarantees is not reconciliation, it is vulnerability. But in Mogadishu, where alliances are renegotiated constantly, the file becomes something else, a pressure point, a bargaining chip between blocs, a test of whether Somalia can balance justice, security, and statecraft without sacrificing the people who paid first. While the Northeast was consolidating, Somalia's western edge showed how quickly legitimacy can rupture. In Awdal, centered on Borama, protests and deadly unrest erupted around the political meaning of Khair Ise and who gets to claim the cultural authority. The region where clan memory is political infrastructure. Analysts described it as more than a cultural dispute, as a political crisis exposing years of grievance and perceived marginalization. And as tensions rose, calls surfaced for Awdal to be integrated differently within Somalia's federal structure. Another sign that Somaliland is not only uncontested political bloc, but a landscape of competing local claims and loyalties. When Mogadishu cut ties with one Gulf patron, the vacuum does not remain empty for long. Reporting on shifting regional rivalries has described Saudi Arabia moving to counter UAE influence across the wider Red Sea region. A competition that spills through Yemen, the Horn, and strategic corridors. In that environment, rumor becomes a political tool. Talk of new alliances, of security umbrellas, of informal blocs that promise protection to weak states, often travels faster than confirmed policy. But even when rumors outrun facts, they perform a function. They signal fear, and they advertise dependency. Las Anod is not asking for speeches. It is asking for guarantees that outlive cameras, security that does not push civilians, grievance that does not disappear, justice that does not become selective, and diplomacy that does not trade citizens for corridors. Because the lessons of the hour is simple and brutal. Somalia's unity will not be secured by declarations. It will be secured by delivery and the world's recognition politics, whether through Israel or through any external actor, does not determine Somalia's border. In the end, sovereignty is not what a state says on television. It is what it can protect without fragmenting itself to do it.